In this video, we introduced two new kinds of indicative verbs. The good news about these new kinds of indicative verbs is they don't use different endings, but based on some features internal to their stem, they undergo a variety of changes when the endings that you already know are added onto them. These are called contract verbs and liquid verbs. With both contract and liquid verbs, you're going to see similar types of changes. And we're going to practice sort of identifying contracts and liquid verbs in this video itself. So as with the last video, I encourage you to have your whiteboard handy, and it would behoove you to do these quizzes, to practice these quizzes on more than one occasion. So I'm going to present some information, and we're sort of going to do a review and recap by means of you answering some questions yourself. So we're going to start with contract verbs, and we'll move on over to liquid verbs after that. When we're talking about contract verbs, we're talking about verbs whose stem, that is before anything has been added on to it, either a morpheme or a connecting vowel or an ending, just the stem itself ends with these three letters. And these three letters are all short vowels: alpha, epsilon, or omega. So our three sort of go-to examples for this video are going to be agapao, poieo, plerao. So the stems end in alpha, epsilon, or omicron respectively. I think I said omega earlier. I meant omicron, of course. Alpha, epsilon, omicron. The stem ends in one of those three short vowels. And when things are added to these short vowels, specifically when other vowels are added to them, something called contraction occurs. And this contraction is going to form a variety of different changes to the stem and the ending that's being added on to the contract verb. And those changes are almost always, there are some exceptions based on the rules of accents that you have not learned for this class. There are some exceptions, but usually about 90% of the time, a circumflex accent, the accent that looks like this, or sometimes like this, depending on the font, is going to be added over the vowel or the diphthong where contraction has occurred. And so the contractions that occur are going to look like this right here. So I'm going to give you 5 different rules of contraction and then a contraction chart that will show you all of the different contractions that occur in the Greek New Testament, specifically with respect to contract vowels. So when you have these combinations, an epsilon and an omicron in either order, or two omicrons together, when those come together, the result is going to be omicron hoopsilon. So poieo is our contract verb for an epsilon stem, and when the amen ending is added on, the epsilon of the end of poieo, the stem, contracts with the omicron of the ending to make oo here. And you'll notice that the circumflex accent is over the resulting oo. The next rule is that when two epsilons come into contact with each other, you're going to get the result epsilon iota. So if you want poieo to be in the second person plural with the eti ending, connecting vowel epsilon, and then the te suffix, the combination of the poie of the stem with the eti of the ending is going to make poieti. And so once again, we've had the combination there marked by the circumflex accent. And then in most combinations of omicron or omega with any other vowel, besides these exceptions up here, you're going to have a omega resulting. So that if you have something like alpha with omega, the result is going to be, or alpha with omicron, excuse me, the result is going to be omega. The same would be true if you had alpha with omega, an omega would result. So besides these exceptions up here, the combination of any vowel with an omicron or an omega is going to make an omega. Omega is going to sort of win out. Remember, omega literally means O big. So I think of this as O big or O strong, the one that's going to overcome the other vowel when it comes to contraction. When an alpha and an epsilon come together, so for example in agapao, when we add the eti ending of the second person plural, we're going to get an alpha with the epsilon dropping out, and then again the circumflex over it, noting that the contraction has happened there. And then lastly, an epsilon plus an alpha, so the opposite of this, the opposite order here, is going to go to the long vowel eta. So one way you can think of these two rules is that the first one is going to win and go to its long form. There is no longer form of alpha, so it stays alpha. In this case, the first vowel wins out, the epsilon, and goes to its long form eta. It sort of evolves into its stronger form after eating up the alpha that comes after that. So if we were to put this into chart form, so everyone sort of learns differently. For some people, a big chart like this is really, really, really helpful, especially if you're sort of type A. Whereas for others, just these rules might be helpful. And you're not asked to memorize any of this for this week. This is more for your reference, for your recognition of when there is a contract verb. But what this table down here does is it essentially puts these rules into a chart that combines any short vowel with a long vowel or diphthong that it might combine with, and these are going to be the results of those different combinations. And again, for your reference, I give you here forms of agapao, poieo, and ploirao. Underneath them, I've shown you the combination of the vowels and how they've ended up being what they are. And you'll notice that in every occasion here, you have a circumflex over the vowel that has been contracted. So for all of these present active indicative forms here, you're going to have the circumflex indicating contraction has taken place. And then just a little bit more as to the sort of grammar and the handling of contract verbs as you go to translate them in the New Testament itself and in the homework exercises. So dictionaries, when you look up one of these verbs in a dictionary, what it's going to give you is an uncontracted form. So a word like agapao, you'll see this in the dictionary, but you'll never see the word agapao in the Greek New Testament or in a homework assignment, because the contraction would actually take place. And the contraction of this, the omega, is going to win out. It's going to swallow up the alpha, and you're going to have agapo with a circumflex over it. So the contraction happens, but in the vocabulary list and in Greek lexicons or dictionaries, you're going to have the uncontracted form listed, and this is for your convenience so that you know what that stem vowel is. So just be aware that this is not an actual word that you will see in the wild in the Greek New Testament. You'll always actually have the contraction taking place. And then the other thing to note is that these contractions only happen in the present and the imperfect indicative. The other tenses are not affected the same way by contract verbs, or contraction doesn't happen with the other tenses precisely because other things are added. So in the present and the imperfect, you have the connecting vowel of the ending put right up against the stem that has either alpha, epsilon, or omega. And when that vowel, that connecting vowel, is put right up against the stem, that's when the changes happen. With the other tenses, because they use a morpheme, they'll have a morpheme before the vowel, the contraction doesn't happen. The morpheme sort of serves as a buffer between the stem and the ending. But all that to say, there are still changes that happen. So the aga, and the change that normally happens is that the short vowel of the stem will lengthen either to an eta if it's an epsilon, or an epsilon or an alpha, one of these two stem vowel will lengthen to an eta, and an omicron stem vowel will lengthen to an omega. So the first person singular future active indicative of agapao is going to be agapeso. The alpha of agapao has lengthened to agapeso. And that's still pretty easy to recognize that this is from agapao here, that we've just had a lengthening of the vowel, but the sigma has served as a buffer so that the omega doesn't eat up the alpha on the other side of it. And then the same for poieo. If we were to put this into the first person singular of the aorist active indicative, we add this sa tense formative, and then no suffix is used. And so the sigma of the sigma alpha morpheme here has served as a buffer between the epsilon and the alpha, so that contraction hasn't taken place, but the epsilon of poieo has lengthened to apoesa. And then to give you an example of an omicron contract verb, plerao, in the perfect first person singular, pleraka, the plerao, the omicron has lengthened to an omega here with the addition of the kappa alpha here. So that plerao has gone to pleraka. And on to the next thing, liquid verbs here. So fun, or maybe not so fun fact about me. Who wants to know? It's not a fun fact. And it's not even a true fact, but I'm going to tell you it anyway. My favorite drink of all time is San Pellegrino mineral water. Again, not true, not a fun fact, but it is a mnemonic for what are called liquid verbs. And the letters are really small here. I apologize for that. Liquid verbs are, I also call them mineral verbs. So this is going to be what I call them. This is not official terminology. You won't hear most other Greek teachers or Greek readers call these kinds of verbs mineral verbs, but I find it helpful as a mnemonic to remember. So mineral verbs are verbs whose stem end in one of 4 letters here. And I'm going to write these larger since I haven't given you them large enough on the screen here. Mu, nu, rho, or lambda. Mineral. And so verbs that stem end in these 4 letters are going to undergo certain changes because these particular 4 letters will not accept a sigma after them. They exile the sigma. They do not allow it to be in the word or be right next to them at all. And so this is going to affect the 2 tenses that use a sigma for their morpheme, namely the future, which uses the sigma for the active and the middle, and then the first aorist active and middle, which uses the sigma for the sigma alpha morpheme. And so what happens is that because these mineral letters, mu, nu, rho, and lambda, won't allow a sigma to come up against them, what happens is that for their future and for their first aorist, they use something different altogether. So the future active and middle, they're going to add an epsilon to the verb stem rather than a sigma. So you can think of the sigma being replaced by an epsilon for mineral verbs of the future tense. And what happens then is that then you get contraction. That the result of the epsilon with whatever ending comes after it is they're going to contract, just as they do with other contract verbs. And so, for example, men is our root from μένω, and if we want to put this into, we want to add a future, we can't use the sigma because this nu will not accept a sigma after it. So instead, it puts the epsilon there and then the amen ending of the first person plural. And the epsilon and the omicron are going to contract with one another to make μένουν, and once again we're going to get the circumflex accent over the contracted diphthong u, omicron hupsilon. And so our future active indicative first person plural of μένω is going to be μένουν rather than μένσάμεν. We'll never see μένσάμεν in the New Testament or in any of the exercises because this sigma, the nu, doesn't allow this sigma to go next to it and instead uses the epsilon, which causes contraction. When it comes to the first aorist, what happens is that the sigma of the sigma alpha tense formative drops out and we just get the alpha with the endings added on. So it's going to look like amená, amenas, etc. rather than amensa. And you can see why that happens. The combination of nu and sigma with something after it doesn't really work. Amensa is a little bit more difficult to say, or at least Greeks didn't like to say it as much as amená. And so the sigma of this tense formative drops out, and oftentimes before it you'll get some change or lengthening of the vowel. So this is from μένω, the epsilon has gone to the diphthong epsilon iota because of the change to the ending of the sigma not being there. And the most important thing to note sort of for your recognition of these mineral verbs or these liquid verbs is that in both the future and in the first aorist, the mu, the nu, the rho, or the lambda is going to remain. It's going to be there as part of the verbal stem. And when you see that mu, that nu, that rho, or the lambda, or I ask you what in this verb stem has caused a change, or has caused there not to be a sigma there, you're going to be able to say, oh, it's that mu in there. Or it's that rho that's still in the verb itself. So your key to identification for mineral liquid verbs is going to be those letters mu, nu, rho, and lambda. And that will explain why there's changes that come after the mu, the nu, the rho, or the lambda. And here, for your reference, I give you an overview of different forms of Lego. So the future active, the future middle, and the first aorist active with these changes that have gone on. So you'll notice the contraction over all of these except for menumatha. And this is for reasons of accent rules that we have not learned. But the contraction with the circumflex accent over the contraction, except for in the case of menumatha, is your strong hint that something funky has gone on, and then you see that, oh, this ends in nu. This must be a mineral verb. And then over on the first aorist, again, we have the dropping of the sigma alpha morpheme for the first aorist, and as a result, the men from μένω has gone to main. That there's been a lengthening as sort of a result, what is often called compensatory lengthening from the dropping of something else in the word. So those are for your reference, and so that you have sort of, and of course Black gives you more of these for the contract verbs as well in the book itself. But these are for your reference, not for your memorization. So what we're going to do here is a couple different quick quizzes, 3 different ones, and I'll tell you ahead of time that this one is actually going to be repeated. It's going to be scrambled and repeated after we do a different one. So go ahead and grab your whiteboard. Number from 1 to 7. You may have to do 2 rounds where you answer a couple and then erase and rewrite because there's 7 of these here. But go ahead and write down answers to these questions based on what you've watched in this video. I ask you make guesses. Don't go back and look in Black's grammar, or don't go back and look in the video. But actually make guesses about this because I'm going to go over it and then I'm going to give you another chance to do it in just a moment here. So go ahead, pause, write down answers here, and I'll do the same. All right, you should look something like this. The 3 letters, or what 3 Greek letters do the stems of contract verbs End in 3 different short vowels, alpha, epsilon, or omicron. And I should be clear that alpha has a short and a long form. So this can be a short vowel or a long vowel. What 4 letters do the stems of liquid mineral verbs end in? Mu, nu, rho, and lambda. San Pellegrino, my favorite mineral water drink. Explain what happens with contract verbs. The vowel of the stem, this short vowel, reacts with the vowel of the ending, namely the connecting vowel with the suffix. The tenses that are affected by mineral or liquid verbs are going to be the future or the aorist, namely the first aorist with the sigma alpha, and that is because it's the sigma that interacts or will not be accepted by mu, nu, rho, or lambda. And then which tenses of contract verbs will undergo contraction? The present and the imperfect. The other tenses down here, when different morphemes are added, we get a lengthening of the contract of the stem vowel, the short stem vowel. And then 6, sorry, we kind of went out of order here. Back to 6, the accent that usually indicates contraction, that something funky maybe has gone on, is going to be the circumflex accent. And so the next thing I want you to do is we're going to get our hands dirty with some Greek, with some contract verbs and liquid verbs. What I want you to do is just on your whiteboard, write contract with it underlined, write liquid with it underlined, and then write the letters of, the numbers of those in this list that are contract verbs, and then write the numbers of those that are liquid verbs in the sentence. And so there are going to be one or the other. There's not going to be any third category here. These are either a contract verb or a liquid verb. All right, so this is what you should look like. Contract verbs are going to be numbers 1, 4, 5, 6, and 8. Liquid verbs are going to be 2, 3, 7, 9, or 10. If you got one or more of these right, let's go ahead and have a high five. 1, 2, 3. Boom. Way to go. So proud of you. Most of this is going to be should be straightforward once you figured out how to do this. So one way to do this is to sort of figure out one category or the other, and then look at the rest and realize that they are in the other category. So what I'll do here is identify the liquid verbs, those whose stem end in mu, nu, rho, or lambda. So I go down this list, and the first one is actually the trickiest. Kalete. You might think this is a mineral verb because of this lambda, but this is not the last letter of the stem. This is from kaleo. So the epsilon here, the contract of the epsilon iota, is from the epsilon of kaleo combining with the eti of the second person plural ending here. So this one is actually a contract verb, despite the fact that it has a lambda in its verbal stem. So the lambda is in the verbal stem, but it's not the last letter of the verbal stem. So liquid verbs, their last letter, the last letter of their stem is going to be lambda, mu, nu, or rho. So 2, apokteino is our lexical form. So nu, a mineral verb. And then 3, apostelos is from apostel o. So ending with a lambda in its stem of apostel o. Then our next mineral verb here is going to be 7, krin o, the nu. And then era from iro, the rho being our last letter of the stem. And then apokteina from the same verb as number 2 was, apokteino, with the nu indicating the liquid verb. And that's going to leave the rest of these, of course, as contract verbs, which we could just do it that way. We could just say, well, the rest are contract verbs, but it would behoove us, or it will help us to figure out what the stem vowel, the short stem vowel of each of these contract verbs is. So this first one, kalete, is from kaleo. So the lexical form is going to be epsilon omicron, so an epsilon contract verb. Number 4, mises, is going to be from miseo, another epsilon contract verb. Same with poiete from poieo. Agapomen is an alpha contract verb. Agapao, and then when the alpha and the omega combine, the alpha from the stem root and then the omega from the amen ending, it makes that that omega there with the circumflex over it. And then number 8 is from iteo, and in this case contraction has not happened because we have a future. So this sigma right here is the sign of the future, and what's happened is the iteo, the epsilon of iteo, has lengthened to an eta with the addition of the sigma there. So no contraction, but is still a contract verb. So that one might have been confusing as well. All right, last one, and you might be tempted to skip over this, but I promise you doing it again will be worth your while. I'm not lying to you about that. It would behoove you to do this one more time. The more times you repeat something, the more likely it is to stick in your brain, the more likely you'll be able to recall it later on something like a grammar quiz, per se, or by chance. So go ahead and one more time. I've mixed up this quick quiz from 2 slides ago, and we're going to do the same thing here. Go ahead and answer these 7 questions on your whiteboard, and I'll do the same. All right, taking it home here. Explain what happens with contract verbs. Oh, let's do a high five one more time. Say you got 3 or more of these right based on what you look here. Let's high five it. 1, 2, 3. Boom. Way to go. So proud of you. What happens with contract verbs? The short stem vowel, the alpha, the epsilon, or the omega, reacts with the vowel of the ending in some way, usually indicated by a circumflex accent. The tenses that are affected by liquid or mineral verbs are going to be the future or the aorist. That is because mu, nu, rho, and lambda don't like to have a sigma next to them, either the sigma of the future morpheme or the sigma of the sigma alpha first aorist morpheme, and so they reject it, and you get an epsilon instead in the case of the future, or a dropped sigma with some compensatory lengthening with the first aorist. The 3 Greek letters of stem contract verbs are going to be short alpha, short epsilon, short omicron. What happens to these short vowels when a morpheme is added is that they will usually lengthen, either to an eta in the case of alpha or epsilon, or to an omega in the case of omicron. And this is your reminder that omicron is O small, omega is O big, so omicron goes to omega. The tenses that are going to undergo contraction with contract verbs is going to be present tense and imperfect tense verbs. The accent mark that usually will be seen about 90% of the time over verbs that have undergone contraction is going to be a circumflex. We'll also see the circumflex as a result of contraction for things going on with mineral verbs as well. So the circumflex isn't necessarily a sign of a contract verb. It might also be a sign of a mineral verb. But what it does indicate is that something fishy has gone on that deserves your further investigation with respect to what kind of verb it might be. And then lastly, the 4 Greek letters of liquid or mineral verbs are going to be mu, nu, rho, or lambda.